Hello and welcome. I'm your host and speaker Vijay Koda, and I'm new sub-developer at Infometry. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. In today's webinar, I will be talking about designing REST APIs with RAML. Feel free to drop questions on the topic or share your struggles and experiences during this live session. We will answer your queries through chat. Let's start the session. This session is organized by Infometry. We are a pure play data analytics company based out of Fremont, California, with our offshore development center in Bangalore, India. We came into Inception back in 2010, and since then, we have been offering domain specific analytics solutions for high tech, energy, life sciences, retail manufacturing, and finance customers. Being a data analytics software services and solutions provider, we focus on delivering predictive and prescriptive analytics solutions like cloud data warehouse implementation, data governance, enterprise service bus, microservices based on integration solutions, big data, cloud DevOps, Salesforce CRM, and product engineering, and so on. Infometry has been an engineering and consulting services partner for companies like Informatica, Matillion, Snowflake, Tableau, and Adapt Insights, Looker, etc. Infometry offers domain-specific analytics solutions for high-tech, energy, life sciences, retail, manufacturing, and finance customers. In addition to the services, we have also developed more than 15 cloud connectors for IACS. One mentioned under Blue Blocks are developed and owned by us, and the rest are all developed by us only for organizations like Informatica, SAP, LADS, etc. We have also developed state-of-the-art analytics solution Infofiscus, which can be hooked to any on-prem or cloud CRM, ERP, or planning app. Infofiscus is 100% cloud-based pre-built analytics software developed using open architecture. Infofiscus comes in three different flavors, that is finance, supply chain, and sales and marketing analytics. We are delighted to announce the launch of the next generation Infofiscus Sales Analytics Snowflake native application, which aims to streamline sales analytics for customers using Salesforce, Marketo, and Snowflake. That's our quick introduction, and let's move on to our today's agenda. Getting started with today's topic, designing REST APIs with RAML in MuleSoft. So I'll be discussing more about how to design the APIs using RAML. So these are all the contents we'll be discussing in detail today. So before we start, we'll look into what is REST APIs. So REST API, the REST stands for Representational State Transfer. So it is a set of architectural principles for building a web services. And also REST APIs are also the most common APIs that used across the web today. They also provide simple uniform interfaces because they can be used to make a data, a content, algorithms, and media and other digital resources available through web URLs. So one of the reasons why REST is widely adopted is because it works exclusively on HTTP protocol. So if you're not using HTTP protocol, when we send the request to your server, how will the server understand, right? So what should be done with this particular request? For example, do I need to save or do I need to delete or do I need to fetch or do I need to update? So to clarify all these, we use HTTP protocols. So with HTTP protocols, we have standard HTTP methods that we're going to use. So that is HTTP get, HTTP post, HTTP put, HTTP delete operations on the resources that we are going to send. So these are all the things about REST API. So let's move on to the next one, API specification. So API specification is nothing but it provides an understanding of how an API behaves and what are all the things that API will accept and what are the things we need to follow and what are the things we need to send, what type of response we'll get, what type of request we need to send, what are the mandatory fields we need to assign the value compulsorily. So these are all the things we'll be getting in API specification. So yeah, so when it comes to request, what kind of request it accepts for the particular API. So what kind of request it accepts. So it can be a JSON request or XML request or form data request and so on. And what kind of response it returns. So once we send a request to a API, what kind of response we may get? We may get JSON, we may get XML, and also with the different status codes, right? So it can be 200 or it can be 400, it can be 500, it can be 404, 401. So different types of status codes along with different type of response we'll be getting. So these are all the things will be mentioned in API specification. And also what are the mandatory fields? For example, right, like if the particular request accepts an URI parameters, so we should send an URI parameter. If the particular response accept query parameters, we should send a query parameter, right? So these are the things, what are the mandatory fields and what are the response request. So all these things will be mentioned in API specification. So that's why we call it as it will show us, or it will provide understanding of how an API behaves. So let's move on to our main agenda of today, like RAML. See, what is RAML? Abbreviation of RAML is REST API modeling language. So it is also a YAML based modeling language that describes RESTful APIs. So when I said describing RESTful APIs, it means basically you are describing how does your REST API looks like. What is the request format? What is the response format? How does your URL look like? What are the query params and what are the URI params and what are the headers? So basically these kind of things will get it from the RAML that we're going to design anyway. So all of these things we can define in RAML, and it will generate automatically the documentation and description of each and every endpoint. So when we published an exchange, when we published a RAML into an exchange, so we can see if you go to exchange, if you click on that particular API or particular API, so we'll be able to see all the endpoint that we defined in the RAML, along with what type of request response and what are the mandatory fields and everything. That is called as in documentation. So it will automatically generate the documentation for each and every endpoint that we define in RAML. And also it provides all of the information necessary to describe RESTful or practically RESTful APIs. So when it comes to understanding and easily about the RAML, because it is both machine and human readable, because when we define a RAML, when we publish to exchange, so the documentation is automatically created. So in that case, what will happen, like anybody can come and anybody can understand what this REST API is doing, and then they can make use of this APIs if they're authorized. So when it comes to console and notebook, right? So console is nothing but when we are designing RAML, right? In right hand side in the design center, we'll be able to see the REST API endpoint and what are the parameters. If it is any like query or URI parameters, it accept every authorization we said, headers it accept, and what is the request we need to send, what is the response, like everything will be done. We can use actually trigger that in any point exchange while we are designing or API or while we are designing our RAML. So that is called a console. And notebook is nothing but so it just is like a documentation that I already discussed. So that is how it is. And when it comes to design center in Anypoint platform is like all the designing part that we're going to do with RAML is everything will be done in design center in Anypoint platform only. So let's move on to the next part. The initial RAML, like what is the when we create an initial RAML, so what it looks like, what are the root section of the RAML? That means like a header part of the RAML root section. So what are the things it contains? So the initial RAML will contain root section, like which will describe the basic information of the API that we're going to define in our RAML. So it includes API title, API version, base URI, and all the base URI parameters. So here in this example snippet I have attached here. So the first one is like RAML 1.0. That is our RAML we're using, and the title. So when it comes to title, you can mention your title in a words. So RAML in RAML 1.0 title, it's a must, and it's a compulsory attribute we need to define when we are creating a RAML. So next, when it comes to version, you can also mention it is an optional parameter in root section. If you want, you can mention like whenever you update the changes, you can mention like 1.0. When you initial RAML is 1.0, and then when you change something in again, it will become the another version of that RAML, right? So you can update to 1.1 like that. It is optional, so it is not mandatory field. And also when it comes to protocols, so the protocols property used to specify the protocols that an API supports. For example, what we are defining in our APIs, right? So what those APIs will be supporting these two protocols, HTTP and HTTPS. If not, if this protocol section, if this protocol parameter is not defined in the root section, what will happen? Like in the API level, if it what will happen is like what are the base URI that is using the protocol, it will automatically takes that base URI protocol. For example, the base URI looks like HTTPS like sampleapi.com. So the HTTPS will be the protocol for this particular or for all the APIs that we're going to define in this RAML. So media type. So media type is nothing but what type of response we're going to get from a particular APIs. So it is also optional parameter. If it is not defined, it will take the API level response type that we're going to define. Okay, we'll be discussing more about the response type, media type, and all in coming slides. So these are all the initial root section. These are the information it will contain in the root section of our RAML. So next is there is some formats while we are designing our API in RAML we can follow. So the first initial is resource. Resource is nothing but it's an identified by the relative URI, so which must begin with slash. So when we are starting with a new APIs in a RAML, so if you want to define a resource or an endpoint, right? So we can say endpoint in our language. So it's like slash testing. In RAML, we'll call it as resource. So that is the slash testing. And the second property is called display name. It is not a mandatory field. You can, if you want, you can add, otherwise you can leave it. So in this example, I taken as just an API testing for example, for reference. So the next part is method. So here you can mention what type of method that your API should follow. It is get method or post method or delete, update, put, right? So these are all the methods you can mention in the method. And also the second option is after that it will description. So description is nothing but what will this get endpoint will do. So that is you can define in words, and also this is also not mandatory field. It's an optional field. And again, if your API is accepting query parameters, so you should define here with the query parameters. So underneath that, underneath that you can mention the query parameter name. And in this example, I took it as item code as query parameter name. My query parameter is item code, and that accepts string type. You can mention what type of values it will accept using type parameter. In this example, I took a string. It may be number or it may be integer, anything. And I'm making this item code is mandatory field. So it is using the required equal to true. If it is set to false, so it will say false, it's optional now. But if it is set to true, it is mandatory. So we need to send this value along with the URL that we are going to hit. So and also minimum length is 4. Like min length is the parameter that we use to define a specific value. Like we need to restrict to some character for the specific value. So in this case, like minimum length is 4. So this item code will accept only 4 characters as a value. So basically, the query parameter is used to filter or sort the resources. It passed in the URL as a query string and key value form. Like this is basic things. Query parameter is basically used to filter the data or sort of the resources in the server side. It passed in the URL as query string. So, but when it comes to it should be key value pair. The query pair, like it will be key value only, right? Like when you say item code is the key and value should be the whatever value we are going to send. So this is about the basic design of it. Like we should follow the first 4 are compulsory. And also we can add responses to the next. So before getting to that, I will show you an example with post method. Here I'm using get method. So I'll be showing you the post method next. So here I follow the same approach, but the only resource is missing, right? So because I'm using the existing resource that is testing, and I'm just adding another method to that same resource. So the testing is my endpoint. For that, it will accept get method, and also it will accept post as well. So here, when it comes to post, right, it is a create, right? So for that one, we need to send something in a body. So for that reason, I'm just showing an example. So post method, that is get, or method should be post. And when it comes to description, it is optional. Here you can add it or you can leave it as it is. The next part is body is compulsory when it comes to post request, because we should send something in post request. That is the reason body is compulsory. So here you can see I'm mentioning the content type or media type. Application JSON, content type as application JSON, because this post method will accept a request in this application JSON format. If you want your API to be accepted by XML, you can just mention applications plus XML, and you can just provide the example input of it. Okay. So here in this case, I've taken as JSON. So here the content type is application JSON, and an example add, and using example parameter, I added some JSON and request JSON. So this is all about the post method example. So next we'll move to responses. So in responses, you can see we can define for particular resource, we can define responses, or we can define for particular methods like get, post, and for this one also we can define responses. So here I'm defining for particular resource, like we have testing resource, right? So for that testing resource, I'm defining responses. So I'm defining only one response here, that is 200 OK response. So the responses should can be we need to use the response parameter. So after that, you need to mention the status code of the response. Right, we will be getting multiple status code, right? If it is an error case, we can get 401, 400, 500. So this 404 as well. So these are the error case scenarios. When it comes to success run, like we can say 200 okay response, 201 created. So these are the things we'll be getting in a success response. So here I'm considering only success. So in this snippet, so you can see 200. I'm taking 200 status code. Underneath that, we can mention description. It is optional. If you want, you can do it. Otherwise, leave it. So then when it comes to body, so when it comes to responses, the body should be mandatory. So here I'm using, because I'm writing it is in, we'll be getting JSON response. So underneath that, I'm also setting an example. So this might be our API response, that is status equal to success. So these are the this is the responses that we can add once we define our API. That is resource particular to resource or particular to methods like get post methods as well. So we can add our responses for all the types. Okay. So here I'm considering only 200. It can be 400, it can be 500 series, like anything. This is all about the responses. Let's move on to the URI parameters. Let's see what is URI parameter really is. So URI parameter is actually also known as the path param and also known as template URI. So we can call it as template URI, also path, we can also call it as path param as well. So URI parameters includes curly brackets, right? So you can see in the example that I have added here. So the test ID is my parameter and the slat testing is my resource. So for that, you can add test ID and like I'm actually enclosed with curly braces. So that will be our URI parameters. So that is a syntax for define to define URI parameters for that particular resource. So we need to start with slash and then curly braces, and within that curly braces, we should mention our URI parameter. So it is basically used to identify specific resource or resources. So as like it is also used to identify specific resource or the resources or filter operations. So resources often take dynamic data as well. So such as ID or even search filter. Like as I said, like we can use this URI parameter search filter as well. So these are examples. So you can see here the get slash testing is my resource and test ID is my URI parameters. So here you can see the responses section that we discussed earlier. So I have added for the get method here. I'm not added for the entire resource. I have added for get method just to show you guys how you can add for get method. So you can see underneath the get, I did not add any query parameter or like any body and all because it's a get method. We can directly mention the responses, and I'm considering 200 OK response here as well for this particular resource test ID method or resources. So these are all about URI parameter. So let's move on to the security schema. So the security schema basically is if you do not define any security, all right, schemas for your API, anybody as the URL can access your APIs. So that will be like unauthorizedly access your APIs when they have some URL for your application, right? So for that one, they can also misuse, they can make use of that URL and they can misuse of your API and all. So for that reason, if you want to only unauthorized person, like sorry, if you want to only authenticated person should access your APIs, we can define security schemas in our RAML. So only authenticated person, those who have some credentials, whatever the authentication method we are going to implement, those who have those credentials only those users should access our API. So unknown users, we can by doing this, unknown users can be restricted. So here the keyword secured by. So we'll be using secured by keyword to define our authentication method. So it can be defined at the root level of your root section of our RAML, or else we can define this secured by using secured by. We can also define at our resource level. Let's see what type of authentications we can define in RAML, right? So it supports like six authentication types, six authentication types that we can define in our RAML. So that will be OAuth 1.0 and OAuth 2.0, and also basic authentication, as you know, is username and password based authentication. Digest authentication means it desired like it is also one of the type authentication, and when you say pass through, it requires headers or query params to pass through the API based on a defined mapping. So when it say X other means it is like custom. So it custom authentication. We can also define our own custom authentication type in our RAML. So these are all the API authentication that will support in RAML, and also what is secured by and what is security schema. So I'll be discuss. So let's say what are the declarations, how to declare the security schema. So what are the parameters we need to follow to declare our security schema? So here in this case, so security schema declaration, this so here we can there are a couple of fields that we need to follow here. Okay, so the first is type. So we should mention what type of authentication we are defining. So that whether it is over 2.0 or 1.0 digest or basic authentication or our own custom security authentication, right? So we should define in this using this type keyword. So I'll be discussing how to define and all in next slide. So these are just a declaration. What are the parameters we need in order to declare our security schema, right? The display name, and it is an optional one. If you want, we can just like we can define our API, what it will do, and description, what exactly in detail we can mention in description part. Described by here we can just mention security related request components that will be defined or recommended or data mined by the security schema. So it can be headers or it can be query parameters or responses. Like we can like describe means from where we need to send these authorized details, right? It can be query parameters or it can be headers, right? It can be request, can be body. So these are all the things we'll be defining in described by. Settings means, for example, if it come when it comes to OAuth 1.0, so they have their own parameters in order to access the OAuth 1.0 authentication type. Okay, so that will be like a request URI and token URI and access token URI. So these are the things we should follow when it comes to a particular authentication types that will be defined in the settings section. So let's say with an example of how we can declare the security schema. So here you can see this is an example of the security schema. So here I created a separate file called security scheme.raml. So in design, in our API endpoint exchange, sorry, in design center. So in that one, like I can see the type that I mentioned. I'm taking an example of OAuth 1.0 on one of the authentication type. The type I'm mentioning is OAuth 1.0 and display name. This is OAuth 1.0 security. So as just told, a description. So it will just continues to be supported for all the API requests. I just mentioned some description. As you can see, described by. So when I say described by, I told you like it will describe what in where which parameters we need to send the authorization details. Here I'm considering headers, right? So in header section, I'm saying this is the authorization. This was the key in header section. We need to send this authorization as a key, and the type, the value of this authorization will accept a string. We can define type equal to string, and also the description we can mention for the particular authorization. We have to send a valid OAuth access token because when someone comes and they need to see what type of what we need to send in this string format for the authorization, so they just can see the description over here. That will be a OAuth access token. See, so the next is like responses. So we, for example, when we hit this endpoint while passing these two, what type of response we may get, like error scenarios. I'm telling you. So responses here 403. So it can be OAuth request wrong consumer key or the access token is expired or maybe some invalid access token. So these are the things we'll get from 403. We can add description here. So if anybody comes, they can expect these kind of responses from our API. 401s, the bad expired token. Like the token is expired and then it cannot be authenticated with our API. So these are the response when it comes to authorization and this one. So settings, as I told you, right, like with the particular to their own authentication methods, we have settings we need to define. For example, if it is OAuth 1.0, we have some mandatory field that we need to provide here. So that will be a request token URI. So we need to provide this URI request token URL for it and authorization URI as well. So and token credentials URI. So these are some mandatory fields that we are using OAuth 1.0. We need to define in the settings. And also there is one more type called access token. We can also define and what type of access token also define. We can define in the same settings parameter under the parameter of settings. So this is the separate security schema.raml have created. So in the next slide, I will be explaining about another example that way how to import and how to import the RAML that we defined separately and how to use it on our road section and also at the resource level. So here you can see I just told you I have created the previous example in a separate RAML file. So I'm just including it in our main RAML here. So this is the root section of mine. So this is the base URI. So api.develop.com, it is HTTPS. So security schemes. So we need to use the security schemes parameter. Underneath that, we can define our own security schema name that will be used when we are actually using that we can. It's like anything. Like if you are using any if you can define your own security schema name. It's not like we need to define only OAuth 1.0. You can use your own name. So after that, as include like this. Sorry. So include keyword I will be discussing in detail about this keyword, but in order to include any other outside files within our RAML, right, we will be using include keyword here. So and then I'm just importing the security scheme.raml that I created. That was the previous example I showed you. So that was I'm just importing into this our main RAML. So here you can see there are two ways we can define the secured by. Uh, to make use of this security, we'll be applying security schema for this particular entire RAML. So whatever the APIs that we're going to define in this RAML, all of them will be secured by 1.0. So they need to send what is the required authorization access token in the header part. So if you define in this way in the root section, like secured by, and this is how we are going to define OAuth 1.0. So it will be applied to all the APIs that we're going to create in the RAML. So we don't want that. I need only for particular API. For example, in this case, sample API, I have sample endpoint. So I only need for this endpoint. I don't need for authentication for other endpoints. So in that case, underneath the sample one, you can see secured by, we can use it. And if you enter it, like if you click on enter after typing this, so you can mention your security schema name here. So in this case, for this sample, particular to sample API, the authentication type or 1.0 authentication will be applied. Whenever you need to access the sample endpoint, you need to provide access token. Either one of them we can use, right? So this I just wanted to show you. That's why I defined both of them at a time, the same RAML. So in this way, we can use security schema and then we can create security schema. So in these examples, I only took OAuth 1.0. So when it comes to basic authentication, we can just define like the settings, like everything will be same. When it comes to headers, right, like we need to use username and password, both of them instead of authorization. And then in settings.xml, we just need to provide the demo, like username and password as the requested things. So this is the example of how we can use security schema and how we can apply it to a particular method or all the APIs that we're going to refer at the resource level. Is right. So a trait is used to extract patterns from method definition that are common across resources, right? So like when we are using when we have a common resources within method definitions, right? Method definitions means a get, and then when it comes to post get, right? So when we have a common definitions among the methods, so we can make use of those, and then we can take it and we can just create as a traits in our YAML. So means if you have common section, we can extract within methods and also create it right so that we can avoid the duplicate code between different methods. If the same method is having, if the different, if the more than one methods having a same kind of uh, common section for all the or for all the other than like other methods. So we can just make use of the tries and we can define one common section and that can be reused in various methods, in other methods as well. So, and also trades is a general RAML fragment. It can that can be used to define almost any part of the API specification. Right? So a trait like it's like a method. So it can provide method level nodes such as the description, headers, query parameters, and responses. So it's like we can create at right by taking these common descriptions, headers, and query parameters and responses. So means we can create a traits to add this to the description and to define the headers and to define query parameters and to define the responses. So in this example, you can see I'm taking this query parameters. It like the traits can be defined at the top of the root, in the root section at the top. So we can use the keyword called traits colon. Underneath that we can mention the trait name, and then we can define our query parameters whatever we need. So here I've created two traits that is in this snippet example snippet that is secured and paged. So that was the traits we defined, right? So underneath that we have on a endpoint called books. So underneath that we have get method So each keyword is used to refer the traits in RAML. Just like using the square brackets, underneath that you can just use to execute and paste. So here I'm setting an example like load token name is called access token and max is equal to 10. I'm setting some dummy like example values for this query parameters here, but you can use just is execute and then page equal to like max pages. And also you can see there is in query parameter section I have used slash for like lesser symbol and greater than symbols. So if we use this kind of name, so when we are referring traits here, so we need to mention the value for it. What is the value for token name? Just like the page as well. So we have made the maximum pages here, right? So we can mention the 10. So that is why I added in this example, I added these values. So these are both all the traits. Basically, it's all like reusable. So when you have a common section, we take it, we add it as a traits, and we can reuse across multiple methods. That's it. So the next is resource types. So resource type is also used to extract patterns from resource definition that are common across resources. When I say traits, it's a method definition that are common across resources. When I say resource types, it is common, the resource definitions common across that are common across resources. So basically, it is a template that is used to define the description method parameters. So that can be used by multiple resources. If multiple resources had some same common patterns or some repetitive code, right? So that we can extract those information as a resource type, then we can use in the resource wherever it is required. So that's also the very like resource type and traits are both basically used for reusing purposes. And when we have common, when I say traits, it will be method level. When I say resource type, it is a resource level. That's it. That's the only difference. So it both of them will be used for reducing the code and duplications in our RAML. So it can be reused and again if the other methods also using the same thing. So that's all. So when I say resource types, so it's kind of so it should be created as a separate files as well. It's not only like we need to define at the top of the root section like resource types and all. So we can define as a separate resource types and we can refer using exclamation include keyword. So after including that at the top of the level resource type and then collection colon exclamation mark include that resource type file name. After that, like whenever in the method level, if you want to use that collection like resource type, right? So we can make use of the type keyword here. Like when I say traits, we use is keyword. When I say resource type, we use type equal. And type is also we can also used for defining a data type. Like I'll discussing next type equal to string or something for particular query parameter, parameters, right? So here we can also in order to define type that will be the in order to define resource type also we can define a type keyword. We can make use of the type keyword that is collection. In this example, as you can see, so under the product section, I have created a separate. In this example, I've used in the same RAML itself. So resource types. So collection is my resource type name. Underneath that, I have defined what is common for what is common. It is like, for example, description usage. So inside try says under the get method, whatever it is there, we are using creating asset right. But when it comes to resource types, I'm actually starting from once the resource is run, that is slash product, right? So after that only from description point of view only, I'm actually reusing those. I'm actually adding into resource type. So that is how the resource type will be. It will be under the resource. When I say right, it will be under the method. So see this example in the products, I'm using type colon, the collection name that we have defined for the resource type. That's it. So let's move to the next is the data type. So data type, as you know, it's commonly known in other languages as well. So it allows the user to define objects and reuse them at any level in RAML file. It will define what kind of it's kind of a setting a rules for the particular parameter. It will only accept this kind of like integer data type, like integer values, number values, string values. So it's setting a rules for the particular field that we are using and we are declaring it is. We are declaring it will only accept this. So that is called the data types. So in RAML, the data types in RAML can provide a concise and powerful way of describing the information utilized within our API. Like it will be describing the information so that we are describing this information means we are setting this value. So for that value, it will only accept string. So that's kind of things. So already, as I told you, like it's already like data types is adding rules for validating the data I can a type declaration. So when I say type declaration, we're adding a rules against what we are going to type in a value. That's it. The type node within the API RAML is used to refer external data type. So here as well, the types node within the API RAML is used to refer external data type as well. So when I say resource type, we also use type. When I say data type, we also use type colon, and it can be externalized. Like data type is only like we can only define within our RAML. No, it's not like that. We can also define externally as well as a file, and then we can include it. So here you can see I have defined the types, data types in RAML itself. So types. So here I've defined more than one, like more than two types of data types. So when I say types, that is the org is my name. So that is an object, and we have defined as an object. So when I say person, here I'm also defining it as an object. And when I say properties, underneath the properties, we have some names, right? So that will I'm declaring it as a string. The person is an object, but underneath that we have name different properties. So those properties it is accepting string data type. So just like a phone, it's a string, it will accept, and we can also provide pattern. So in this example, so when I say manager, so it's a person. It's like person means we can refer the other data type that we are already defined into another data type that we are going to define. So it's not like once we define, we can't use it in other data type. So we can use it. That's one of the feature in our RAML. We can use the already defined data type with our new data type that we're going to define. So here manager is type equal to person. So it will be we have included this person data type in the manager. So just like that, we are actually, and also you can see in admin API we are referring to the person data type, and also we are using enum data type. So enum means like it will accept low and high. In this example, it will accept that is low or high. Just like that, we are using referencing other APIs as well. So whenever we need, so in this you can see, and at the last you can see there is an argument and argument ID. So we have an called it's a resource and it's a URI parameters. So in the body, in the responses body, you can say I'm using type equal to org. So type this org will be displayed whenever we hit this endpoint. So that is how the data type is defined here. So these are the examples I added like just like that. So the same example in in a better way, better thing this. So there's the same thing I explained. So we are defining org, and then first name for the person. For the phone, we are setting pattern as well. For the manager, we are referring the already defined data type that is person. Again, in properties, we can say reports and phone number. Phone number is also already defined. We are referring it here. And say admin, it is we are defining enum as well, low and high. That is another data type. We can see there are three object data type, string data type, enum data type, and we're referring another object, another data type. So in this API, like we can just mention, for example, when you say query parameters, so we are adding page number, and we can type is equal to number. So this is another data type called number. We can how we can define. So these types can be externalized while if we create a separate file, and then we can just include types colon exclamatory mark include that file name here. So then we can just make use of type equal to whatever we have mentioned for the type name. So this is an example and how the data types will work in RAML. So the libraries, next is libraries. So the libraries in RAML are actually used to combine any collection of data type declarations, resource type declaration, and try declaration, and security schema declaration into modular and reusable groups. So when I say libraries, so it will be like across the organization that we can, once we create a library and once we add those traits or resource types or the security schemas or like data types. So those can be imported in under another RAML as well within the organization. So where they can reuse those whatever is already defined for another APIs. So that's the main objective of libraries that we are going to create here. It allows us to define multiple types within the same library. It's like, for example, if I say traits, right, it will only accept method level. When I say resource type, it only accepts resource level. But when I say library, so we can create a single file called library dot library like live. So underneath that, we can define data types. We can define resource types. We can define security schemas. We can define data types. So traits, everything can be defined in a single file. And then when we save it, so it's like it will be like available to the all the RAML files or their all the users that within the organization they can make use of it. These libraries that is already present. So, but when I say traits and resources, it is restricted to the RAM, particular to that RAML. But when I say libraries, so it will be available to all the within organization, all the users that is going to create the RAML, right? They can make use of it by importing from the Exchange modules. So in this example, I'm showing that only. So here you can see I'm imported from there is an already library API that we already create that is already present, that is employee library. So I'm just making use of after importing from Exchange modules, I'm making use of this in our RAML user. So this is an example for employee personal info. So you can see, so when we want to use a library in our app, like in our RAML, we need to use the users keyword. So that is what I'm trying to do here. You can see users colon. So it is is my library name that I defined for my own. And then we just need to provide the path of the library. That's it. So once we're done with that, like we can just make use of the library equal to. You can see in the body for the responses type equal to. We have defined employee personal info in the library that contains the response for the employee personal info. So we are using type and then the library name and dot whatever the file that were created under the libraries. So this is how the libraries will work. So when I say modularity, right? So the RAML, it's like one of the feature, like it's a feature that will provide using libraries like modularity and reusability. So modularity means it allows our developers to break down the large Lambert files into smaller and reusable components, right? So these components can include any type, like as I told you earlier, resource types, types, and security schemes, right? By defining these, our the reusability elements in libraries, we can manage and maintain them separately, and then promoting better organization and modular design, right? So, for example, a library contain all the common data types and error responses used across multiple APIs, right? So, which can then be referred in different YAML files. As I told earlier, so the libraries will be accessible once we define as a library, it can be accessible by different YAML files. So when I say reusability, the main objective of the library that we are rights and resource types, everything will be like reusability only. So once you define, so the other anybody can within the organization can reuse those APIs. So that is one of the feature as well. And as I say, users keyword, like if you want to import or we need to use it in our YAML, we need to import it using the users keyword in YAML. So next, exclamatory include keyword. So this is the main actually whenever I'm talked about externalizing or importing as a separate file and we need to import and all, right? So we should use this exclamatory mark and include keyword here. So I'm just showing an example here. So I'm creating a folder called a post in my RAML. So then just a directory I'm creating as a post with the name of post. So and after that, so under the post, I've created a API JSON. Like I've created a sample response JSON for my API. So I put that in API.json here. This is the content that I added. It's an object. Okay. So after adding this, so see, instead of previously we have what we had is like example, and then here I had defined the item code and all. Right. Instead of that, what I did is like I just add that example response into a separate file called API.json in the post directory, and using exclamatory include keyword, I'm importing that into our main YAML. So this is the this is the purpose of the exclamatory include keyword. Yeah, that's all. From our perspective. I hope you enjoyed this webinar. So it's time for
Hi guys. So that's all from today's session. So if you have any queries and questions, I'm open to answer now.
Yeah, hi Vijit.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah, here how are you going to make sure one of the query parameter is optional and one is mandatory? So how to
Yeah,
keep.
Kavi. Yeah, as I explained in the tried sections, right? So we can make use of the required parameter here. So when we define the traits or when we define a parameter, right, query parameter or URI parameters, or we can define a required parameter underneath that. So we can set it to true or false. So when we set true, it is mandatory field that should be provided while we are sending a request to that API. If we set it to false, so it will be like optional. Even if you set the value for it, it will accept. Even if you don't set the value for it, it will accept. So we can make use of the required keyword for it. So that's how we are going to make a query parameter is optional and mandatory.
Okay. So what are the difference like traits and resource types?
Yeah, like when I say traits and resources, right? So traits means it will be like method level. So as I explained already, so it will be like method level and we can define what are the common factors that we have. So we can define it in a single place and we can make use of using each keyword, we can make use of those for the different resources and also the methods that we're going to use within the same RAML. So when I say resource type, so resource type is the resource level. So basically it is a template, right? So that is that we use to define the descriptions and methods and parameters that can be used within multiple resources in a same RAML. So just like both traits and resources are used for reusing purpose and to avoid the duplication code in our RAML.
Okay.
So the another difference is like the keywords that we're going to use to access these two. Traits is keyword and resource type is type keyword.
Yeah. Okay, Vijay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, hello, I'm Anurag. I have a
Yeah.
question. What are fragments?
Yeah, fragment is actually basically used to externalize your security schemes, just like we are using explained about libraries, right? So just like we call the library as a fragment only. So fragments are basically used to externalize your security schemes, libraries that we defined, and resource types that we defined, traits, data types. So all those things that we discussed, right? We can call it as a fragments only. So it's all fragments of the RAML. So just like we are going to define a libraries, right? Just exactly we can define a fragment. So and also they can be used across any RAML and within our organization. If suppose we have multiple RAMLs and they need all the whatever the things to define for particular RAML that can be reusable, right? So those things can also be used in other RAML. So by creating the fragments, so we can reuse those things, reuse the methods, security schemes, resource types, data types as well, whatever it is needed. So these are the things that fragments will come under. And also when I say fragments, right, it can be a version. So for example, if you update data types within a fragment, so we can, when we are publishing to exchange, right, so we can version it like it is a 1.1.0. So initial version to the next version. So then whenever they are using in the RAML, so they need to they need to use that version number. So it can be a version as well. So it is one of the all the things that we discussed, we can record as fragments as well. We can define and we can externalize, we can publish to exchange, and other RAMLs can also use it. So it's all about reusing purpose about the fragments.
Yeah, thank you. I have another question.
Yeah.
What is the difference between traits and resource types?
Yeah, Anurag, as I explained to Kavi as well. So traits is like method levels and resource type is resource levels. So traits and resources both are used for reusing purpose only to avoid the duplication code in our RAML files. Suppose if you have some kind of similar responses to the most of the APIs that we are going to define the RAML, so we can define it as traits and then we can make use of it. And also when it comes to resources as well, as I explained in earlier slides, so it is same thing. If if you want to avoid the duplication code in our RAML, so we can define it as a resource. And then if you want to access the resource, just like after defining a resource, underneath that you can use type keyword and then you can use the resource name. So for traits, you can use is keyword and then you can just define what trait name in that. So under the method. So that is the major difference of resource and threads. Both are used for reusing purpose.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vijit, for the amazing session. Is there
Yeah.
anyone who would like to ask any questions? Please feel free to ask any questions.
If you feel, you can also send an email to our email ID. So I'll be answering through emails
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Okay. No questions. So thank you all for joining us today. I hope you found the session informative and useful. Uh, yeah, we will be sending out an email with the link for the recording. And yeah, thank you once again for being the part of this session. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you guys. Thank you for joining.